Good morning and welcome to City Talk. It's a weekly program, a podcast, TV program that here at the City of Waco we produce to share with you information about the city and its operation, some of the challenges and opportunities that we all have. I'm Larry Holsey, Director of Municipal Information and Communication. I'm your host. Today I'd like to welcome someone brand new to our community. He is our newest and frankly the youngest council member I think we've ever had, Darius Ewing, who was just appointed by the City Council about a week ago. You had your first meeting this past Tuesday, and you hit the ground running. And so, before we went on there, I asked you kind of a little bit has it been, like drinking out of a fire hydrant or something?
Absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely has. It's really interesting, the appointment process versus the election process. You get appointed and you sort of have these 2 weeks from the first meeting you get appointed at, if you get appointed on the day of the interview, to start shaking all the hands you can shake, meeting with all the people you can meet, forming these relationships, and then as soon as that next meeting comes up 2 weeks later, you're voting. So you get sworn in at that meeting, you take a seat, and you're voting on things that are happening in the city.
Millions of dollars of things.
Yes.
And that's what's shocking to a lot of people. You look at the agenda, which most people don't ever look at the agenda unless it impacts them. But there's millions of dollars, some federal, state, and funding, grants and things, but you all are making big decisions on. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the really important thing that I really strived to do in those 2 weeks between the appointment and the first council meeting was meet with as many people as possible that were affected by these decisions we were voting on, meet with people that could speak into why it was important to extend a TIF deadline, or the value that the things that we were voting on brought to the city, and try to get a really good understanding and let that inform the conversation we had around the subjects.
Before we get into information about Darius Ewing and your background, describe to our listeners and viewers both kind of District 4. When you were talking about District 4, I mean, I could do a little bit of a job, but you know it now probably better. But describe where District 4 really is in the city.
Yeah, so District 4, essentially, if you're going to make it a box, and this isn't exactly right, and I'll go ahead and add some color after this, but essentially Franklin to Herring along the river on the downtown side, and that runs basically to about 36th Street along Franklin, and then up to sort of Hillcrest and back. Obviously, there's some cut-ins there, so the reality of it is it goes down to 30th and Franklin, goes across Waco Drive, over to 36th Street, up and then over again a couple blocks, and then really it goes around Mackenzie and up toward the other side of Hillcrest and circles back around. But for the most part, if you're looking at Herring and Franklin as a border from the river to 30th Street, and there's a few blocks around that you're going to add in.
Boy, you did that. I was following when you did it.
Yeah.
That sounds right. I would have just said Herring to Franklin or what, big. Well, you obviously have done your homework and really, and just a quick conversation I've already had with him. He is a very brilliant young man, and he's when he studies something, he's got it down. I'll compliment you on that right quick.
Well, I appreciate it.
Now tell me about Darius Ewing, because the thing that I'm going to say is that you have fit the district perfectly because you come from a background that really is part of many of the challenges that District 4 comes. Now, you didn't grow up in Waco, but you're kind of a Central Texas person.
Absolutely.
Tell everybody kind of who Darius Ewing is and where your family background.
Yes, so both of my parents were in the military. My dad is born and raised St. Louis, Missouri. So I was born in the closest military base to St. Louis, Missouri because it was free. So Scott Air Force Base, Illinois. And right after I was born, my parents got stationed in Fort Hood. So everyone packed up and moved to Texas. And then so while they were in the military, living on Fort Hood and the cities around Fort Hood, so Central Texas, both of them fought in the Gulf War, came back. And when I was 5, they got a divorce. Dad moved back to St. Louis, and for the duration of most of the year, my brothers and I were with my mom. I have 2 brothers. And so for a good stretch of time, she was a single mother with 3 children. And if you know anything about transitioning from the military back into civilian life, it's very difficult to get your footing, find well-paying jobs, especially right away, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s. So she was able to get a job at a government contracting company that initially was really low paying, really low wage. And those times were very tough for us, frankly and honestly. have vivid memories of nights where she would make dinner for me and my brothers and not really have anything left for herself, and learning to live in a way that was sort of as minimal as you can be and still find happiness. And I think the good thing about that was we were young enough that as kids you don't necessarily notice it in the moment. You're working with what you have. But it makes such a difference in the way I view life now, because my mom was able to work her way up within that government contracting company. Both my parents went on to remarry, and so financial stability kicked back in sort of as I was going into junior high. And going from being at or below the poverty line and knowing the struggles and being able to look back and say, my mom didn't know how she was going to pay rent, clearly didn't know how she was going to feed her children, and being able to look back on that and have that inform the way that you view life now that you've made it out of that, genuinely gives you a compassion that I don't think you'd otherwise would have for people in that situation. And having made it out of that, you can look back and know the joy and just the opportunity and the life change and the increase in quality of life that comes from just a few steps that can take you from living in poverty to getting out of that.
And that's an incredible story, and I thank you so much for sharing that, because that shows that anything is possible if you struggle hard enough and you be patient and you just believe in the system and use the connections and everything you've done. You went on and attended Baylor University and got a degree in corporate communications. Is that correct?
Corporate communications, yes.
There you go. And now you're working in the real estate. Talk about a lot of that.
Yeah, so my roommate right after Baylor, he worked for Prosper Waco with an initiative called Campus Town Waco, which his job was to plug in local, specifically young talent with jobs in Waco to keep the talent in Waco. And then so he set up essentially a job interview for me with Rydell, and so I jumped on board with them, and my job has expanded obviously over the years as Waco has changed in the last almost 5 years, and it's been a joy, and also I think gave me a lot of experience in neighborhood building, community building, and then also my first instance in running into something with the city. We undertook a really large development a couple summers ago, and having to meet with the city on specific deadlines and getting permits, and really exposed me to a side of the city that you otherwise wouldn't know existed or had to think about until you have to deal with it. So that was another thing that piqued my interest in city government and local government in that way.
Well, as you've already probably found out, most people don't know anything about city government. As long as your trash is picked up and your water turns on and when you flush it, it goes away, and some of those basic services, the rest of it, they don't care anything about. And so you're just saying that you've experienced it also from a private standpoint. And so you're gainfully employed in the real estate and the investment type business. Which, by the way, I want to tell everybody and remind everybody, city council members, including the mayor, are not paid. It's not a salaried position. They get an expense account a little bit, and you get a cell phone, but that's about it. So it's not, you're not doing this for the money.
No, not at all, not at all. And I think just to touch on that, genuinely, the experiences I had in learning about the city is what inspired me to want to pursue a city council seat, because I would love to have everybody in Waco know the way in which the city exists to serve them. And I think there are steps we can take as a city to operate more from a customer service standpoint past picking up water, picking up trash and making sure water's turned on. Things like I ran into when we were undertaking developments and working with the permitting department, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I can't imagine someone who's had their house tagged to come before the Building Standards Commission, and they either know how to repair it themselves or know someone that can. And oftentimes there's a knowledge barrier or a language barrier in navigating the systems to get that fixed. And so I think we can take such strides as a city to look to service that population.
Well, I think one of the key things, and I've always maintained this, and one of the greatest successes that the city of Waco and many smaller cities do, being not a paid position, whatever else, we count on the volunteerism aspect of our lives. And I know I've been the same way. What I do for volunteer, I do it from the heart. And when you're serving a city now as a city council member, you're volunteering, but you have a passion to help and to serve, to learn, and to become that liaison from the citizen side to the big corporate city government that some people get confronted. But you're doing it on a volunteer basis. And I think that's really brings in the passion and the commitment that you have to want to serve and be that. I think that's to me, a lot better than being a paid position.
Yeah, I think that's always the struggle that you wrestle with a position like city councilman or mayor when it's a volunteer position. I think there's a lot of good that comes from that because it does sort of weed out people that are doing it as a job and looking for a paycheck in that. But quite frankly, I think there are people that face a barrier to becoming a councilman because they have a job maybe that it pays their bills, but they don't have the autonomy to leave work on a Tuesday and go to a city council meeting for 4 hours or take a meeting in the middle of the day for a city purpose. So I think there's good and some potential trip hazards that come from that. Obviously, the hope being that the people that want to serve their city in the capacity of a city councilman that maybe can't because of the job they have, that whoever their representative is listening to those people and making sure that because they can't be in this seat that they're given a voice.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because being a council member is a big commitment on time.
Yeah.
And it is a sacrifice many times with your employer, and you have to make a good relationship. And thankfully, we've had good employee relationships that have allowed the flexibility for a council person to be able to volunteer and share that. So you've mentioned a couple other things too, but the unique thing is for District 4, first of all, you're the youngest person, I think, to ever serve on the city council. And I think that's because you're 26?
26. And
26 years?
I don't know if it's officially been confirmed. I know that people were looking at to see if that was the case. And that one's a little bit less important to me, but I'm just glad to serve.
No, but I think it brings, we have the Waco Youth Council, and we've always counted on that teen aspect. But you're bringing a different age group. Frankly, you're in the group, as you well know, with the COVID thing. Right now, 20 to 29 is the highest people with COVID. And so that's a perspective that will maybe generate some help in communicating to those people about the COVID thing.
Yeah, I think having someone that's your age and has access to the same opportunities to go out and do things, to sit here and I'll even say it right now, you need to stay home because if I get COVID, there's first off, not 100% guarantee that I'll just be fine and experience flu-like symptoms and be over it. It could get much, much worse, but say the best case scenario is I get it and I experience very minimal symptoms or none at all, which is the scarier thing, and I pass it along to people that I interact with. Yeah. People in their 20s generally feel a sense of invincibility, and I think that now is sort of the time to put that to the side and realize that not everyone feels that same sense of invincibility, and it's really important to care for your neighbors and care for your community in that way. And the easiest way to do that is by doing nothing right now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, and the council selected you amongst a wide range of ages and genders, for that matter, too. And they selected you, I think, primarily because of all the great things that you're just sharing with us already right now. But you're also the first person of color for District 4. How does that make you feel? And tell me what you feel like, because District 4 is largely a variety of color, a large Hispanic, African-American community as well. Talk about that and how you feel like that better places you to represent the people that you're in that district.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's important to acknowledge that people of color, when they don't see representatives that represent them, it's a lot easier. And this is not necessarily for people of color, but for any demographic. If you don't see representatives represent you, it's a lot easier to tune out that portion of your life. So the hope is, I'm a person of color in this seat. I'm a black man in this seat. District 4 is primarily Hispanic, but the hope is that, one, there's shared experience in living in the United States as a non-white person, and two, you get to look and see, okay, there are more than just white people that are going to represent this district, so maybe I can get involved in a way that I didn't think I could before.
Very well said. If you just joined us, we're visiting with Darius Ewing, who is our newly appointed and council member for District 4, kind of the center and northeast area of Waco as a rule. And we're getting to know Darius. And You mentioned in some of your background and your roommate or friend worked with Prosper Waco. I know Prosper Waco, and you did a little bit early work with them, I think, on the side, some communication type experience thing. Talk about Prosper Waco, because I think it is something you have a passion for, and then we're going to get into neighborhood associations, a few other things in the about 14 minutes we have left. But talk about the Prosper Waco and how that initiative really parallels a lot of the things I think you've talked about you want to accomplish as a District 4 representative.
Absolutely. Prosper Waco has done a phenomenal job in finding the right people to take on challenges that need to be taken on in Waco. And the good thing about them is none of them are elected officials. They don't have to get any votes. They don't have to worry about pleasing anybody. They have to worry about improving quality of life for Wacoans.
Volunteers again.
Absolutely. The good thing for them, while they are paid, it is nonprofit work. But the good thing for them is that they're able to then come to the people that are elected officials and public officials and say, hey, we've done all this legwork that you don't have the time or capacity to do. Now we just need your seal of approval on it. And you can see by looking at this that it's going to improve quality of life for Wacoans across the board. Specifically, something that I'm incredibly excited about, incredibly passionate about, that Prosper Waco has been working with recently, that the city is on board with, and I hope to see it come to fruition soon. Obviously, with the pandemic, things are always a little bit shaky, but is this rapid job training program, skilled workforce training program, that essentially will look like a 10-day training program that's going to not take place downtown in City Hall, not take place at Prosper Waco, but it's going to be in buildings and neighborhoods around Waco where the people are, and say, hey, we've got this 10-day training program, and at the end of it, we guarantee you an interview with one of our fantastic manufacturing or skilled technician service jobs in town. Because as I've mentioned before, and as is fairly common knowledge, before the pandemic, the unemployment rate in Waco was 3.3%, and the poverty rate was near 30%. So there's a gap there that people are having jobs that aren't paying them well. So Prosper Waco, and again, the city of Waco jumping on with this is so exciting to sort of bridge that gap of employment to poverty and say, you've got a job already, we know you want to work, let's get you a job that pays you well.
Great. Yeah, because as we talked before we went on the air, Prosper Waco has identified the three primary things: health, education, and financial security, or financial literacy as it is. You can't be financially secure if you don't have a job. You can't get a job without education. A lot of times you can't be educated if you're sickly or having a health thing.
Yeah.
So it's a vicious circle in a great extent. But I think great effort is being done, and it'll be definitely improved by somebody. You have just mentioned a lot of the topics that I think can make a big difference.
Yeah, and again, it is a really exciting thing, and that was one of the things that made me want to get involved in Waco early on, was realizing if you have an idea that is beneficial and you work with the city, you can bring that from an idea to actualization, and this is something that's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, well, opportunity. That's my favorite word. We have opportunities, just like what we do with this television equipment and all the broadcasting stuff. We have opportunities to share, and you're seeing the things that are opportunities that you as an individual can make a big difference as you represent. There's about how many people live in the District 4? Do you have any idea? That's maybe a wrong question to ask.
Yeah, I need to look at that. I think the most recent thing I read, it was, I really
like it for 1,400 homes or something like that within that area. I mean, it's an unfair question. I apologize for that, but anyway. So, one of the things that has kind of fallen down from use in again, that's transparency and involvement by our citizens, is neighborhood associations. The very first neighborhood association created was the Sanger Heights Neighborhood Association back in 1990, 92, somewhere there. And from there, Brook Oaks and some of the other ones, and a lot of the neighborhoods from across. But District 4 was kind of the boiling pot, as it may be, or think pot, for early on neighborhood association. Dean Highland, for example, that one's kind of fallen to not activity. And some of the others. Talk about neighborhood association, maybe what some of your goals might be to reignite those.
Yeah, so District 4, I think, maybe started as sort of the boiling pot for neighborhood associations because it is an incredibly diverse district. And so you have all these different people that have all these different needs and wants and ideas for the district, and they had a place to come together and discuss those. for the most part, Dean Highland is the one that is no longer active. We want to pursue that and make sure that it's got a neighborhood association and take it from not active to thriving. We also want to care for the rest of our neighborhood associations in District 4 and generally Waco at large, because what that does is, as a council person who lives in Brookview, it gives me an opportunity to reach out to someone that lives in Brook Oaks, to someone that lives in Dean Highland, so on and so forth, and gather information on, hey, what are your needs? What can I do? And it gives me an opportunity to sit in on these neighborhood association meetings and hopefully have enough shared ideas at those meetings that we can run up the ladder. But I also think yesterday even I met with someone from Grassroots, and we talked about how there isn't a playbook for neighborhood associations. So it is difficult right now to get one up and running and to do things to make it succeed. So that's something that we need to look at as a city as well, is looking at, hey, what can we do to provide necessary information, steps to take, or even possibly funding to get these things off the ground and to let them succeed. So that's something I think we should do as a city and need to look at, as well as partnering with our nonprofit organizations that are community-based, like a Grassroots, to pursue that and push that into our communities.
Yeah, Mike Stone and the Grassroots, along with our housing department for that matter, have done some really creative and good things for the housing and to change an area that has maybe some blight and everything else. You just look at the 15th and Waco Drive from there, where they take on
incredible.
Off area right in there, and just transition into a lot of those. And a great opportunity. Neighbor Works, I know, is another partner that does a whole lot of great work. So, so some of your observations. Some of you've been in office now for 2 weeks or a week.
Just over 2 weeks, officially sworn in though for just a few days.
I
didn't get my badge until a couple days ago. I had to knock on the door like everyone else.
Yeah. But what are your observations, and how you feel like you're being received within your organization, your district, first of all, and for that matter, the whole city?
I think, generally speaking, it's been really encouraging and really positive, and a lot of people reaching out to let me know that they're in support of me and want to help in any way that they can. And any negative pushback has been. My hope is that the intent is, that's their way of reaching out and saying that I want to inform you on what this district needs. So that's my hope, is that if there's negative pushback in my direction, that we would have the opportunity to converse about, okay, if you think that this is the way the district needs to look, let's have a conversation about what I can do to help that become the reality. And then as far as positive feedback, positive reinforcement, I welcome that all day. And even with that, I'd still love a chance to sit down. And if you say that you're happy that I'm in this seat, I'd love to hear what you have to say about what we need as a district and as a city. And again, the same goes for if you otherwise would rather have someone else here, I would still love to, at least until November, while I can, do my best to represent you.
Well, and your interesting thing is the fact that Darius is a city council representative for District 4 right now until the November 3rd election. He has to run again in November if he's interested, which I'm sure you should. It sounds like what you need to do. And then the other interesting thing about that, the normal District 4 race or council election is in May. So he will have to run again in May of 2021 to retain that for 2 years then. And then you're in it for a 2 year, very challenging time.
So I actually recently was given sort of the most black and white breakdown of this very unique position. And just the way that the charter and the bylaws work is an appointment fills out the remainder of the term, which would be until May of 2021. However, the election charter or bylaws state that if there's a general election in November, then it has to come up for election at that point. So I just happened to get the appointment right in the middle of a general election, and the fact that the rest of the citywide elections that would have been up have also been pushed to November because of the pandemic. So really unique position. I'm genuinely excited for it, and I hope that, as I said, if nothing else, I'm here till November, and I hope to do as much good as I can while I can.
It sure gives you motivation to get in there and really get active and do stuff real good, to prove yourself, and so that in the election process turns easier. And on top of all that, in addition to the pandemic that we're going through, Wiley Sim, our city manager, on the same day you were sworn in, was his last meeting. And now we have a new city manager starting, Bradley Ford, as far as he's been our deputy city manager. So another transition that's going to be interesting that we all start working together. Early impressions of city management.
I am, and even before this, wildly impressed with city management and the job that they have before them, and the fact that they find time in the day to get done what they get done. Obviously, I view it as kind of a benefit that Bradley and I are starting at the same time, so to speak. I think his term officially begins next Monday, but because that gives me someone who's experiencing a little bit of what I'm experiencing, but also has this vast wealth of knowledge that I can dig into and learn from, all the while he is stepping into a new role as well. And also I'm taking a city tour with Wiley next week, and I'm excited just to parse his brain for just little things about the city that are going to help improve it going forward as well.
He has got the wealth of knowledge, and I always kid him. He knows more of the underground of Waco, and I don't mean the crime underground.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the pipes and things.
Yeah.
He can start talking about pipes and flood, all that kind of stormwater drains and everything, and tell you stories. It's just incredible what he knows. One of the other things that's an opportunity that's happening in your district, it just started this past week, is the 25th Street Theater old site, where we're going to have our new fire station number 6. And our fire administration officers are going to be moving to the corner of 25th and Grimm, a historic site for many, many Wacoans, and an opportunity for the city to infuse money and revitalization of that area, which used to be a major corridor going through Waco in the commercial. Talk a little about that, what your thinking is.
Yeah, so that's exciting for a number of reasons. First off, I think when you're on 25th Street and you cross Waco Drive, you realize it changes. And in the best way, it changes culturally. So it's this really vibrant Hispanic district sort of on this corridor. And you see all of these Hispanic businesses, and even, like I said, speaking with Grassroots yesterday and sort of hearing a really long history of that corridor and how those businesses lease out space to other businesses that then overtake and move into different buildings on that street. So it's really, basically from Waco Drive to Cumberland on 25th Street, this really vibrant Hispanic cultural district. And so it's really exciting to see the city putting dollars there. And another thing that's really awesome, and I think this was a part of the plans beforehand, but the people on that street asked for it, is they're also having a community center attached to the fire department that's going to give them a place to hopefully utilize for the arts and utilize for community meetings, and just give them a place to call their own, to hold discussion and talk about ways in which to improve and continue to work toward having this incredible cultural district we have there just be vibrant.
Absolutely. We've got about a minute left. I want you to be thinking about anything else, because this is your opportunity to at least speak to the public. But I cannot compliment you more, truthfully and honestly, that I'm impressed. You know, this conversation we've had has enlightened me a lot about Darius Ewing. And so what final comment?
Thank you. Final comment, people, fill out your census form. I cannot stress enough, every level of government uses the same census to provide billions and billions of dollars. The first estimates this year were that there were going to be 1.7 million black people not counted, 2.2 million Hispanic people not counted, and that equates to $3.3 billion that's not going to go to black communities annually for the next 10 years, and around $4.2 billion not going into these Hispanic communities annually for the next 10 years. Truthfully and honestly, there may be concerns about filling out a census form and letting the government know where you live and letting them know where you are. If you have an electric bill, they know where you are. And if you fill out the census in a timely manner, you can go online and do it. No one's going to come to your door to ask you to fill it out in the first place. But what you're doing is you're ensuring that your neighborhood and your community gets billions of dollars in funding, because the money's there, and they just need a place to put it. So please, I can't stress enough, fill out your census, because there's no do-overs if you miss it. You got to wait 10 more years, and we have an opportunity now to make voices heard and allocate funding and resources to parts of our community, and also as a state and a nation to communities that have been underserved. So fill out your census. That's my parting thought.
Darius Ewing, who is the new council representative for District 4. I am so impressed, and I know our listeners and what got to be. I'm so thankful that you are now going to be our council representative for District 4. You're going to work very well with our mayor and the rest of the council. They're going to listen to you, and you're going to listen to them. I think it sounds great. It's exciting times in Waco and for District 4. I want to thank you, first of all, for being with us, and I thank all of you all for joining us today on City Talk. We hope you'll join us again next week for more information about the City of Waco on City Talk. This program is produced by the Municipal Information Department of the City of Waco and is provided as a public service by this station.